Balance the books.
Well, Pablo O'Hara is former political advisor to Nick Clegg and three successive Lib Dem leaders. Pablo, welcome to LBC News.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, good to have you with us. If you were advising Ed Davey on his speech tomorrow, what would you be telling him to say?
Well, I think Ed Davey has already got it in the bag, really. I mean, if you only have to look at that last election to see what a remarkable leader he has been. But I think one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, and I know that the Liberal Democrats are doing a great job on this already, is they have a really, really strong sense of who we are as a nation, our global leadership, how we're seen on the world stage. Of course, they were the only party to oppose the Iraq war from the very beginning. We all know how that turned out. They're obviously fiercely against leaving the EU. And now, as leader, Ed is really clear about our position on Trump and calling him out for what he is. And so I think it's a really important moment in our country's history, actually, as our continent faces the war that we do with Ukraine and Russia invading, and then when we have a president who is not standing up for our allies. And Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats have led the way when it comes to standing up for the UK's national interest and against Trump's bullying. So I think I want to hear more of that. I'm sure that we will. He's done a great job so far, and I know that the party has announced that they want to step in where the US has stepped back. So we've seen the US, obviously, with the cutting of aid and funding and support, that there are more than 20,000 Ukrainian children who have been kidnapped by Russia. They're at risk of never being found because of this Trump's recklessness. And Lib Dems want the UK to replace that funding. So I don't think Ed Davey needs a ton of advice from me, because I think he's already doing a fantastic job. But I'm glad to hear and see the party really taking our role on the global stage seriously.
It's interesting, though, what you said there, because you said about, they know where the country is, where we're at personally. I mean, okay, forget the Iraq war, but Labour were saying the same before the election. And look where they are now. It's all very well to, be in opposition or be the third main party. I appreciate there was a coalition, between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. But it's easy to say all these things when you're not in power. As we've learnt from Labour, once you're in power, then it really hits you, especially at the moment.
Yeah, it's obviously much harder being in government. Labour are finding that out now, but I think that is why it's even more important that the Liberal Democrats use the voice that they do, both locally and nationally. I mean, the one thing I would say is never, ever, ever underestimate the incredible power and difference that local councillors and local MPs can make. So the Liberal Democrats have 72 MPs, but they have thousands of councillors across the country, over 3,000. And the difference that you can make on a local level to people's lives is extraordinary. And I've worked from single councillors all the way up to the top of Parliament, and the difference that can be made in the local communities, not just holding Labour to account or holding the Conservatives to account, but really actually listening to what people care about, the issues that matter to them. And that might be just something like a pothole at the end of their street that means that it's quite difficult for them to get out of their house or whatever it is. Really, really simple, basic stuff can make really, really big differences to people's lives. That is where the Liberal Democrats really excel. And you see that when the Liberal Democrats win in local areas, when they get their kind of claws into a constituency, into a council, it's very difficult to get them out, because actually people see the difference that they make. And once they elect a Liberal Democrat, and maybe in the last election, let's be honest, a lot of people were just out to punish the Conservatives in the general election I'm talking about. People might have thought, I'm going to lend my vote to the Liberal Democrats. I want to get rid of the Conservatives. But once you get a Liberal Democrat MP, you get a Liberal Democrat councillor or a Liberal Democrat councillor, and you see how hard they work, I think people won't turn their backs on that. I think they know that they've got a good representative.
But we heard him mention there about the growth strategy or a lack of growth strategy with this government. But of course, as he knows from the coalition, you don't know what you're going to get till you walk into office. And of course, they had the famous note they made, a big news of from Liam Byrne. There's no money. Do you think, and of course, it's very unlikely that he's ever going to have to enact a growth strategy, even in coalition, because, of course, there has to be a coalition agreement if they were to share power at the next election. I'm wondering whether you think he might have sympathy for Rachel Reeves, bearing in mind the situation that she sees herself in, very similar to the situation that they found themselves in 2010.
I mean, the economy is in a difficult place, and we know that the country's had more than a decade of kind of battering. But, an awful big part of this that no one wants to talk about is, of course, leaving the European Union, which the Liberal Democrats did not want to do, and they fought ferociously to try and stop. There is a very simple solution to unlocking growth in our economy and across our country, and not just unlocking growth in places like London, like unlocking growth and strengthening the economy and giving back to people across the whole of the country is by getting a closer relationship with the European Union. And actually, it's not just about making the economy stronger through closer ties with the European Union. It's about taking our independence back and making sure that we're not so reliant on the United States, which, as we know right now, is not a reliable ally in more than one respect. So actually, I do have sympathy, and I'm sure that Liberal Democrats and Ed Davey have sympathy with what Labour are having to deal with. I mean, they were left quite a mess by the last Conservative government. But, there is a simple solution, which Ed Davey has called for on a number of occasions, that Labour is refusing to acknowledge them. And that is a closer relationship with the European Union. They're right there. They're on our doorstep.
Okay, Pablo, I appreciate the insights, and no doubt you'll be listening in tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time. Former political advisor Nick Clegg and 3 successive Lib Dem leaders, Pablo Ohana on LBC News.
LBC News.